Takes courage, though. Takes courage on the part of those archaeologists, because they can lose any hope of promotion if they touch ideas like this. Archaeology is a very restricted discipline. If you don't copy what your professor says, if you go off on a tangent, they'll cut you off. There's so many people who've done such great work in archaeology that doesn't fit with the mainstream, and they just get isolated by their colleagues.
I'm hopeful. I really am. And one of the things that gives me hope is Brian Murarescu's,
Yes.
the reception of his material. That book, The Immortality Key, which is fantastic, which points to
Which I wrote the forward to.
Yes, and you did that podcast with us remotely.
Yeah.
When we did that, and he expressed all this information, we talked about these ancient clay vessels that show clear evidence of some sort of psychedelic that was mixed in with wine. That was probably the origins of a lot of the even democracy, a lot, like the Enlightenment. A lot of it came from these meetings, and people came from all over the world to participate in these rituals. This is now being widely accepted, and it's a field of study at Harvard.
Yeah, and let's think about it. If you're locked, this is one of the reasons why psychedelics are being so successful in healing people with profound depression. Because what is profound depression otherwise that you're locked in a very narrow frame that you just can't escape from? And what psychedelics seem to do is they break that lock, and they allow a kind of openness to come in and new thoughts to come in. So it's not surprising that psychedelics revolutionized the ancient world. And I'm absolutely convinced that there isn't a religion in the world, and this is going to annoy a lot of people, that there isn't a religion in the world that didn't begin with experiences in altered states of consciousness. And when we talk about a lost civilization, I believe that was a civilization that grew out of shamanism, and for which altered states of consciousness were fundamental. We've been taught to despise altered states of consciousness in our society today. We're supposed to just be alert problem solvers and not doing anything else. But it's out of altered states of consciousness that the real creativity comes, and that changes in mindset come, and that people can break free from previous restrictions and move in new directions.
I have mentioned to you a friend of mine, Ben Johnson. He's a former Navy SEAL, 11 years as a Navy SEAL, suffering from PTSD, discovered psilocybin mushrooms. This is maybe 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and he began to, a lot of his brothers in arms also were having the same issues with PTSD, discovered that psilocybin mushrooms were a very effective treatment for it. So he began looking into, he became a grower, and he's perfected, and over like 11 or 12 years, he's perfected the growing technique, and he has now been granted the first federal license to legally grow psilocybin. And they're building a laboratory in North Georgia, and it'll probably be where we eventually will get all of our shrooms from. It would be a very interesting discussion for you to talk to him.
I'd love to talk to him.
About what he's got going on. And I've asked, I said, would you ever think about going on Joe's show and talk about what you're doing? He said, I'd love to. A very interesting man. But yeah, 11 years as a Navy SEAL, and he saw it all. And mushrooms is what saved his life. And now he's building a laboratory. He's got funding. He's building a multi-million-dollar laboratory in North Georgia. I've seen this operation. It's mind-blowingly impressive what he's got going on.
Well, that connects us with Dennis McKenna and Terence McKenna's ideas of human beings literally evolving from lower hominids experimenting with psilocybin mushrooms.
It's a very powerful idea, and kudos to Terence McKenna. And I never knew Terence personally, but I do know Dennis very, very well, and he's a fantastic researcher in this field. Kudos to them for realizing it. Terence's book was called Food of the Gods, that the encounters with psychedelics, with ancient psychedelics, were what put humanity on a huge leap forward. And then, unfortunately, we have repressive forces in society that have tried to shut that down and demonize it. But we are missing a very, very important part of our heritage with the attitude that we have to psychedelics right now. And that's why I'm so happy to see that mainstream research is finally getting involved in this. They're realizing that these are real healing vehicles, that they can do things that no other big pharma medicine can do. My only concern is that big pharma takes it over, and that they start putting in, synthetic psilocybin and patenting it in various ways. This again, it's like our past. This is a birthright of all humanity, which we should have a right to. Governments should not have a right to tell adults what they may or may not put in their bodies. Governments should not have that right to hold the keys to our consciousness. These should be matters of personal decision. And for the same reason, looking into the issue of a lost civilization, we should not look for ourselves in the past. We should not look for 21st century civilization with all its particular kinds of tech and all its attitudes. We should be open to something very different in the past, which was nevertheless capable of doing extraordinary